Hi there, come on in. If you're interested in the 1990 Michigan deer season, I tell you, I got a good start on some public opinion by hunters. I asked a couple weeks ago for opinions about this season. Did it seem up, down? What's your opinion of the DNR's projections and estimates? Well, I got an earful here. We're going to be talking with DNR Wildlife Chief Carl Hosford about the deer season. But first, we're going to review our small game season species by species and see how that turned out. Plus, a great recipe and a lot more. So you stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost. It's Thursday night. Time for Michigan Outdoors.
Come on, Mo. Hunt them up. Oh, I thought we had a live one right there.
The DNR made radical changes in bear hunting regulations this year. Licenses were doled out by a lottery system, reducing the number of bear hunters in the woods from about 12,000 in years past to a little over 4,000 this year. In past years, the 12,000 hunters took about 1,000 bear a year. This year, the 4,000 hunters took 650 bear. The DNR wanted to reduce the bear harvest, but the main reason for the changes in bear season regulations were to minimize complaints of trespass, minimize conflicts among dog hunters and baiters, and minimize hunting violations. According to DNR wildlife biologist John Stute, the mission on all counts was accomplished. It was probably the quietest, most mannerly bear season on record, and those hunters who did draw permits had a 16% success rate, the highest in years. Now, white-tailed deer, though, was a different story. DNR news releases for 1989 said the herd was 2 million animals and hunters took a record-setting 450,000 deer. Then for 1990, the DNR says the herd was down to 1.8 million deer, but the winter carrying capacity herd needed to be trimmed back to 1.3 million animals, which is why the regulations remained extremely liberal this season. Early projections show that the season was the second best on record, according to DNR estimates, but many hunters are concerned. They feel too many deer, too many does have been taken, and there's widespread skepticism of the DNR estimates of the number of deer that are currently in the woods. A lot of deer were taken in 1989 and 1990, no doubt about that, but there are doubts about how many are left. We'll take up that subject in a few minutes. The grouse forecast before the season called for a better-than-average harvest, down slightly from last year. According to DNR grouse specialist John Urbane, the take will be down more than slightly. He said the snow that fell during the May nesting season evidently took a bigger toll on young grouse than they previously thought. And the warm weather during this hunting season affected flush rates in the woods, which were lower than expected. Grouse season runs through January 1st. But if hunters are to maximize their success, Mother Nature needs to keep the ice conditions out of the woods. Crunching through the ice and crusty snow alerts the birds. Looks like in 1990, less grouse will be taken by hunters and more will be nabbed by predators, owls, hawks, and foxes. That puts the delectable grouse meat at a premium for hunters this season. Woodcock were pretty much on schedule with DNR projections. The fact that the folks who catch and band woodcock in the spring reported a 20% drop in birds they banded would indicate that local woodcock numbers were down about 20% from last year. Another distressing aspect was due to the May snow that fell in the north during nesting season. Woodcock banders reported that the number of chicks they found was quite low, indicating a high mortality during the spring snow. As a result, woodcock season was down, and what made it a little frustrating was that the woodcock were very spotty. Find them one place, but couldn't flush them in another habitat that looked equally as good. The western UP and central northern lower peninsula were pretty good for woodcock, but the traditional south central UP hotspot turned into a cold spot in 1990. Rabbits are abundant this year. That's what DNR biologist Pete Squibb said before the season, and he sticks with his overall description that they're knee-deep almost anywhere you look. 3 light winters has left a lot of cottontails to reproduce, which is their specialty, and any place with cover should hold bunnies. The northern snowshoe hares also seem to be living out their prediction of spotty numbers. The population is on its way up from previous years, but snowshoe hares in most areas won't necessarily be easy to find. In the south, look for farmland that's dotted with woodlots for cottontails. That's the key to finding them. In the north, you'll find snowshoe hares in the pines or cedar swamps. The season is long for rabbits in Michigan. Statewide, it lasts until the end of March, but most will be taken in December and January. Now, we don't have any preliminary numbers for squirrels. but the season looks to be better than last year when over 1 million squirrels were taken by, some 150,000 Michigan squirrel hunters. That means the average hunter bagged about 6. Like rabbits, they're terribly abundant this year, more so than last, and if they aren't taken by hunters or hawks and owls, only about 15% of the squirrels survive the winter anyway. Freezing temperatures eliminate many squirrels in their leafy nests in the trees. So hunting simply doesn't have a big effect on squirrel populations over the course of a year. The season is open until the end of the year. The next 2 weeks will be a tremendous time to hunt squirrels, especially if the cold and snow hold off like it has so far. Usually squirrel hunting is done by now, but weather conditions will undoubtedly put a few more in the woods during the last 2 weeks of the season. Now, our early season waterfowl predictions said we'd have a season for ducks that would probably be slightly better than last year. But the warm weather evidently didn't push the ducks through in a normal fashion, and in most areas, hunting was average or down significantly from last year, except on the state-managed waterfowl areas. These were the bright spots. Hunter numbers up 2%, and waterfowl harvest was up 17%. The mild weather caused geese to fly in non-typical migratory patterns. The flights weren't sustained, and there weren't a lot of young birds. This was noticed across Canada to our north, and on the managed areas that were so good for ducks, goose success was down 46%. Now, this is a surprise, because the birds evidently were there. It was the weather that didn't materialize to allow the early season predictions to come true. Now, here's a bright spot: pheasants. Pete Squibb predicted the best pheasant season in 20 years, and although my opening day didn't bear out any reason to jump for joy, evidently, overall, hunter success was up 30% from a year ago. Hunters took about 200,000 birds compared to 150,000 last year. Pete feels that the predictions of a better season brought some old pheasant hunters out of the woodwork, which contributed to the higher kill. Hunters with dogs did better, as expected, and the big hitch in pheasant season was the standing corn. Farmers didn't get it out of the fields as early this year, which made hunting tougher. Now, I read one newspaper report that hunting was as good as the good old days. Well, it wasn't exactly that good, but it was up, and a reason to be encouraged for pheasant hunting in 1991. And finally, Michigan's biggest big game, the elk, is in healthy supply. That's because the DNR can count from the air virtually every animal in the herd. Totals aren't in for the December hunt, which is taking place right now for 140 hunters who were drawn by a lottery system. The DNR usually expects about a 90% success rate. The October season saw 90 hunters take 71 elk. That's about 80% success. Well, that's our hunting roundup for 1990. The only thing that lingers is that considerable discussion about the deer. Rarely have I got any letters at all about small game seasons, but boy, do I have a stack on deer season. We're going to be getting to those in just a moment. There were many hunters, though, who had very successful deer seasons, and they made it into our trophy book. Great picture, huh? Cheryl Romatz is holding the antlers of the 7x7 bull elk that her husband Mike took last December in Otsego County. That bull weighed 605 pounds. Dennis Rourke from Brighton got a near-perfect 10-point whitetail buck the last day of the season in Livingston County. From Hartford, Vicki Fields took her first buck, a 10-point with an 18-inch spread on opening day from Van Buren County. Last day of the season, again, Jim Andrzejewski from Bay City took an 11-point with an 18-inch spread from Mackinac County. And here's a Mecosta County 8-point with a very wide 20 3/8-inch spread taken by Jim Helms from Lakeview. Another last of the season hunter, John Muma from Casnovia, got this 11-point in Muskegon County. Also from Casnovia, but hunting Chippewa County, 16-year-old Brian Denhoff bagged a 17-pointer with a 19.5-inch spread. That was with a muzzleloader.
Well, it was just getting light in the morning, and I was looking around for deer, and I just saw him coming up the runway, and he came in about 50 yards, and I shot, and it was just all smoke, and it was over a little hill.
It's all smoke because it was a muzzleloader.
Yeah.
Right?
And he was over a little hill when I shot him, so I just started reloading my gun, and my dad, he came over, and I didn't even know it dropped when I shot it, and I didn't even know it was down there. And my dad got there and he said, "What was it?" And it was big. And so we started over the hill, and Dad, he was in front of me, and he was the first one to see it.
Kind of excited. Well, you whooped your dad with 2 deer this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, bucks of a lifetime. Congratulations, and what a future you have ahead in deer hunting. Great, Brian.
Lots and lots of letters about the 1990 deer season. Quite a controversy is brewing over this, and there's a number of things associated with this that we're going to be investigating in the next couple of weeks. But just to kick this off, well, maybe I'll take this survey here that Bob Scarborough did. He surveyed 241 hunters. 4 of them said the season was excellent. 18 said it was good, 27 said fair, 99 said poor, and 93 said very poor. Well, that's not a scientific poll of hunters by any stretch of the imagination, but it is an index of hunter satisfaction that I've run into quite a bit out in the field. First thing I wanted to do was get with the DNR Wildlife Division. Carl Hosford is the DNR Wildlife Chief. Let's kick it off by asking his assessment of 1990 deer season.
You asked me to describe what is the 1990 deer season like. I don't think I could do it in one word. Okay, to describe the...
I have a lot of people here.
Okay, but I have worked at check stations. I've been involved in checking over 2,600 deer. Our division has checked over probably 25,000 deer. We've talked to a lot of hunters, a lot of people in the woods. I think if I had to describe the season, I'd have to describe it. It was an excellent season. We harvested, I think this is a close figure that we get from our preliminary estimates, approximately 300,000 deer, which would make it the second largest harvest in the history of the state.
Okay, now do you realize
No,
that
let me finish.
That's not the concern of these
That's
letters?
one description.
Okay.
Description number 2 was spotty. We have cold spots. We recognize we have cold spots, and we recognize we're going to have to address them. And number 3, it was, in more than one word, it was a different season. Hunters saw fewer deer, but took a lot of deer. It was totally opposite of last year where you had snow and tracking snow. This year there was nothing the whole season. The first 3 or 4 or 5 days of the season, it was a nice day to be in the woods. I don't know about you, I took off my coat and slept. I enjoyed it, spent the whole day in the woods. So did the deer. But like you, they were wearing a fur coat, they weren't wearing a school, they laid down all day. So in areas where hunters moved, deer moved, where hunters didn't move, deer didn't move. So I guess to describe the season, it was an excellent harvest. It was spotty. We have cold spots we have to address. And it was a different season. We have brought the deer herd down 15%. That was our objective. The harvest is down approximately 10% statewide, probably 20% in the UP, 10% in the lower, northern lower, and 5% down below. But there are cold spots. We'll be analyzing it. We'll do our mail surveys. It'll be addressed by 1991.
I got a stack of letters here, Carl, about deer season. I've thumbed through just about all of these. I found 2 that the hunters said they had as good or better season than last year. Most people are terribly steamed, especially about block permits, and they've documented over and over again a variety of problems, misuses, and I have another bit of information and stack of information on the doling out of block permits. That has been done over the phone, past the deadline. Absolutely no biologist, no CO, nobody coming out and checking, is there crop damage? Just saying, how many permits do you need? What is the process that you will use, just in a nutshell, to check out alleged abuses or concerns or problems that the hunting public has seen? Is there any formal process? Will there be any hearings? Any place where the public can come in, or is it all that they just send a letter?
Good point. I hadn't thought about public meetings on the issue. I'm a firm believer that when you're managing a public resource for the best interest of the public, integrity is number 1, and if you really believe that, you don't mind working out in the open. So public meetings, public discussion doesn't bother me a bit. As far as an internal process, we're going to have to get all the reports back. And again, I invite you, your listeners, to share any information you have with us. We'll check them out. We'll try to define the problems. as far as the magnitude, location. If they fall into neat little piles, it can be corrected. Again, this is the first year of the block permit system. And again, I should say a first year of a program that was never intended to be permanent. But we do have to understand, and this is going to be hard, we have talked for 3 years that in northern Michigan, our winters and our winter carrying capacity dictates the size of the herd we can carry. In southern Michigan, very honestly, it's social attitudes. How much can we carry as far as accidents and damage and what have you? So we've been talking for 3 years that we have to bring the deer herd down. I think it's just dawning on some people that when you bring the deer herd down, you're going to see fewer deer.
Mm-hmm.
You will harvest fewer deer.
What about this idea of having public meetings where the purpose is not to argue and not to defend, just to allow sportsmen, landowners, people come in like they do in the Senate legislative hearings to present information so that they know it'll go to the wildlife chief?
No problem at all.
I mean, I'm not trying to dictate how you do business here, but I more or less represent, in many ways, at least outdoors club members, 35, 40,000 of them, and to some degree the sporting public, and I think a lot of them would like to just present some things to you, not make you defend or argue.
No, that's no problem. There's just nothing to defend or argue. Who do we work for? We're trying to do the best job we can. We're open to suggestions. And if we feel we're right, we're obligated to educate and explain. So it doesn't bother me a bit. I never look at any of these as confrontational. The only people that talk to me, whether they say thank you or I'm angry, are people who care. Mm-hmm. So we got a common denominator to work from. But as far as public meetings, sure, we can have public hearings, but you should understand, if you want public hearings directed towards that, it sounds like a good idea, we can look into it. But it is not that we don't have public meetings every day now. Our wildlife staff will spend a large portion of their time at night meetings, sometimes 2 or 3 nights a week, meeting with this sportsman's group, that sportsman's group, this farm group, this interest group, and what have you, this Kiwanis club. We talk to thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people every year.
But see, that's talking to the group. I'm interested in seeing something happen where DNR listens to some maybe new information or just to get a consensus in a friendly manner. Because I tell you, these people here are on the side of the DNR. They just feel that there's some problems that biologists maybe aren't aware of, conservation officers run across, and these are very concerned people. And they'd like to convey that.
They have to be concerned or they wouldn't take the time to write.
So maybe there's something even Outdoors Club could do to just set up some informational meetings.
Let's talk.
See, the thing what I want to avoid, Carl, and I'm not past doing it, is just going to some of the people I know in the legislature and saying let's hold some hearings, which I think they would, because there's people gunning for the DNR in the legislature. But why do that if we could hold some meetings with Wildlife Division and avoid more politics?
Sure, we can have meetings. We'll talk.
What you just heard was a very cooperative, very concerned DNR wildlife chief. He really wants to be responsive to the problems that are brought out in these letters, and all of these letters he's asked me to copy so he can review, and we're getting piles of them more and more every day. Now, a problem we have here, though, is that Carl Hosford, like the DNR division chiefs, are on year-to-year contracts with DNR upper management. And this is where the problem lies. DNR upper management has been wired into the governor's office, our outgoing governor's office. Well, we have an opportunity for change here. These division chiefs really aren't at liberty to criticize DNR management or to even comment on changes that they personally would like to see. And this has developed into quite a problem. Now, we've heard about DNR staff shortages and money shortages. Well, in the Wildlife Division, sportsmen are contributing $22 million in license fees. Next week, we're going to look at where the license fee money is going. I'll tell you, this is going to go a long ways towards explaining why we don't have the staff out there. It isn't because the $22 million isn't enough. It's that the $22 million is not getting to the Wildlife Division. Far too much of it is going elsewhere. We're going to talk about that next week. We're going to talk about the block permit system. We're going to get into the details of some of these problems that sportsmen are airing, and I'm hearing it every day on the phone and through the mail. Now, I have a little bit of a problem here
because I have pride in the Michigan DNR and the great outdoors we have in this state, and I really don't relish going after some of this dirty linen. I don't want you to get the impression that the biologists in the field and the conservation officers and the field staff are inept or don't care. Frankly, I'm finding out that they're overworked. They're given jobs that are impossible for them to do. That's why we have these abuses that are so widely reported in the block permit system. That's the heart of the problem. I don't want people to misinterpret what we're doing with these public meetings. Now, Carl Hosford has agreed that we should have public meetings, a chance for sportsmen to get together with the DNR and to air some things and reveal some things that maybe haven't come out up to this point. This is tackling the bureaucracy. Like the scent scam, a lot of you thought that that was bold and gutsy. Taking on a massive governmental agency and checking under the sheets to see what's there, that isn't without its problems. I need your help. I need your continued letters, and especially any of you DNR staff who want to speak out. And I know a number of you have contacted me but said, please don't use my name. I can't tell you anymore. It's got to be all off the record. I need your names. I need some documentation if we're going to bring this out in the open. A new political year is ahead with a new governor. It's time to reevaluate what's going on and see if we can get our fish and wildlife divisions back up there with the resources they need so they can do the kind of job that'll bring positive letters instead of negative ones. So keep writing, and we'll set up those meetings. Hopefully by January 14th, we'll be able to announce when and where they will be. Now, let's lighten up a little bit and get on to a great recipe with Kathy Beitler.
We received a recipe for meatballs referred to as Grandma Backhouse's Special Meatballs by
boy.
Kimberly Sticklick-Myers.
Yeah, well, this was a winner in our Fish and Wild Game Cooking Contest, and they do have to be special
Yes.
in my book.
Now this is special meat too. This is goat burger, not venison burger.
Goat, well, game nonetheless.
It is. You really can't tell the difference once it's ground up. And we've got onion soup and eggs and breadcrumbs. The ingredients that are also used in a meatloaf. You could make this into a meatloaf if you didn't want to bother shaping the little meatballs. And then just go ahead and mix all the ingredients.
Oh, onion soup. You know, there's a lot of gourmet cooks look at that and they say, oh no, another shortcut. Mushroom soup, onion soup.
That's right.
It's tasty.
It is. And all your spices and everything are right in the one envelope. You don't have to add anything else. And then just go ahead and make your meatballs. Now you can make them appetizer size, or if you were going to use this dish for a main dish, you could just make them bigger. And then the
What is
sauce,
this?
cranberry sauce.
Oh, great.
It's kind of a sweet and sour here, and sauerkraut.
Oh, this,
And
now
barbecue,
what?
barbecue sauce.
People are going to be gagging at home just looking at this. What
Yes,
a
but
combination.
They really should try it because it really does come out good.
It's going to have to. You know, I mean, my feeling is, Kath, I know you put these in the oven and bake them. My
That's
feeling
right.
about meatballs, you know my feeling about
Yes,
meatballs.
I do.
I mean, they have to be really great. But of course, Bob Garner loves meatballs, and I guess I'm going to sit back and let him do the sales job on me.
You know, they call this stuff an appetizer. Mm-hmm. I know you're not the world's biggest fan of meatballs. Sweeties
Meatballs are not appetizers to me, they're projectiles.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you get your slingshot out, keep your hands off of those. Hey, I know there's all kinds of meatballs. There are the old Swedish meatballs. There are the ones you can buy pre-made, prefab jobs or whatever. These
they're
are
all the
not.
same.
These are not in that league. I like the Swedish meatballs, but these are a cut above, and they're not just an appetizer. These are a full meal. You can make a full. Well, you'd have to make more of them to make a full meal. These are
You
great.
could make a full meal because of the sauce and the sauerkraut that goes with it.
Yep.
But underneath all that, there's still meatballs. In my book, it just nothing against it. They were an award winner.
Beautiful, creative, nicely textured, perfectly flavored meatballs. Not just meatballs.
Well, yeah, and if you don't care for those kind of meatballs, the sauce is outstanding and it saves them. They're great.
Can you believe it? Cranberries mixed with sauerkraut and barbecue sauce. Well, Grandma Backhouse had a creative recipe that is super with ground venison, but would also work with ground beef.